Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the story of a tank that symbolizes both a nation's ambition and its fatal miscalculations, the Japanese Type 95 Hago light tank. How did a weapon designed to modernize an army become a rolling coffin for its crews? Let's find out. In the early 1930s, the Imperial Japanese Army was on a mission to modernize. Horses and infantry were no longer enough. They needed speed, firepower, and a mechanized edge. The answer, they believed, was the Type 95 Hago. Designed for mobility and infantry support, this light tank was sleek, fast for its time, and armed with a 37mm cannon. It was the pride of Japanese engineering, intended to lead the charge across Asia, and initially, it seemed to be a resounding success. When the Hago rolled into China in the mid-1930s, it faced an army equipped with little more than rifles and machine guns. The Chinese forces had virtually no effective anti-tank weapons. Against this kind of opposition, the Hago was a monster. It could easily punch through defensive lines, support infantry advances, and create panic. For the Japanese military leadership, these early victories in China confirmed their strategy. They believed they had found the perfect formula: light, fast tanks for overwhelming infantry-centric armies. This initial success bred a dangerous sense of overconfidence. They thought the Hago was all they would ever need, but a storm was gathering on the horizon, one that would brutally expose every single one of the tank's weaknesses. The first real test for the Hago came not from the Allies, but from the Soviet Union during the border conflicts of 1939, particularly at the battles of Kalk and Gol. Here, the Japanese tanks went up against Soviet BT tanks. Suddenly, the Hago wasn't the king of the battlefield anymore. The Soviet tanks had better armor and more powerful guns. The 37mm shells from the Hago often just bounced harmlessly off their hulls. For the Japanese tankers, it was a shocking and bloody wake-up call. The doctrine that had worked so well in China was failing catastrophically against a modern, mechanized opponent. But this was just a preview of the horrors to come. When the Pacific War erupted, the Type 95 Hago found itself facing the industrial might of the United States. The primary adversary it encountered was the American M for Sherman. Pitting a Hago against a Sherman was not a fair fight, it was a slaughter. Let's break down why the Hago was so hopelessly outmatched. First, its armor was paper-thin. With a maximum thickness of only 12mm, it was designed to stop machine gun fire and little else. An M for Sherman, with its powerful 75mm cannon, could obliterate a Hago from any angle, at almost any range. Even a .50 caliber heavy machine gun, common on American tanks and aircraft, could tear through the Hago's weak armor, killing the crew inside. Japanese tankers knew that if they were seen, they were likely already dead. Second, there was the firepower, or rather, the lack of it. The Hago's 37mm main gun was utterly inadequate. It was a relic from the early 30s. Against the thick, sloped armor of a Sherman, its shells were practically useless unless they could hit a weak spot at point-blank range, which was a suicidal maneuver. The Sherman, on the other hand, could knock out a Hago from over a kilometer away. This vast difference in firepower meant that any engagement was incredibly one-sided. Finally, let's talk about the crew. The Hago was operated by just 3 men, a driver, a whole machine gunner, and a commander. This is where it gets truly insane. The commander was not only responsible for directing the tank and communicating with other units, but he also had to aim and fire the main gun. Imagine trying to command a battle, spot targets, load a cannon, aim it, and fire it, all while crammed into a tiny, hot, and deafeningly loud turret. It was an impossible workload, leading to slow reaction times and poor combat effectiveness. The cramped conditions also meant there was no room for error, and no easy way to escape if the tank was hit. The flawed design of the Hago wasn't an isolated mistake. It was part of a larger pattern in Japanese armored vehicle development. Take the Type 94 tankette, for example. It was even smaller and more lightly armed than the Hago, essentially a mobile machine gun post. Then there was the Type Takami amphibious tank. While innovative for its ability to swim, it shared the same fatal flaws once it got too shore: thin armor and a weak gun. These vehicles all stemmed from the same flawed military doctrine. The Japanese high command was fixated on fighting a war of infantry support in China. They never seriously envisioned a large-scale tank versus tank conflict against a major industrial power like the United States or the Soviet Union. Their entire philosophy prioritized mobility over survivability and firepower, a decision that would have devastating human consequences. The human cost for the crews of these tanks was immense. Japanese tankers were sent into battle knowing they had almost no chance of survival. Their vehicles were death traps, facing impossible odds. Many crews resorted to desperate, suicidal tactics. They would hide their tanks in ambush positions, hoping for a point-blank shot at the side or rear of an allied tank. More often than not, this ended with their own destruction. In the final, desperate battles of the war, like on Okinawa, Hago tanks were used in hopeless banzai charges, driving directly into the guns of the American forces, simply to be destroyed in seconds. The psychological toll on these men must have been unimaginable. They weren't just soldiers. They were sacrifices, sent to die in a flawed machine, for a flawed strategy. So, why didn't Japan just build better tanks? This question gets to the heart of Japan's strategic situation in World War II. Unlike Germany or the United States, Japan was an island nation with limited natural resources. Its industrial capacity, while impressive for its expansion in the early 20th century, was dwarfed by that of the Allies. Building heavy, complex tanks requires vast amounts of high-quality steel, powerful engines, and advanced manufacturing techniques, resources Japan simply didn't have in sufficient quantities. Furthermore, the priorities of the Japanese war machine were elsewhere. The Imperial Japanese Navy consumed a huge portion of the country's industrial output to build its massive battleships and aircraft carriers. The Army's focus remained largely on infantry and artillery for the war in China. Tank development was consistently a lower priority. By the time the leadership realized their critical mistake in the mid-war, it was too late. Allied bombing campaigns were crippling Japanese industry, and strategic materials were being cut off by submarine warfare. They were trapped, unable to adapt or innovate, forced to send their soldiers into battle with the obsolete weapons they already had. The legacy of the Type 95 Hago is a tragic but important lesson in military history. It is a stark reminder of what happens when a nation fails to adapt its military doctrine to the changing realities of warfare. The overconfidence born from early victories in China blinded the Japanese leadership to the rapid advancements in tank technology happening elsewhere in the world. The Hago stands as a monument to strategic miscalculation, a testament to the consequences of underestimating your enemy, and a symbol of the industrial and resource limitations that ultimately sealed Japan's fate. More than just a failed piece of machinery, it represents the thousands of young men who perished inside its thin steel walls, victims of a strategy that was doomed from the start. Thank you so much for watching. The story of the Hago, a powerful example of how technology, strategy, and human cost are all intertwined in conflict. If you found this video interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into military history. Let me know in the comments what other topics you'd like to see covered. Until next time, take care.